Welcome to the main basketball rankings podcast. I am your host, basketball data nerd, Lucas McNally. I got an extra show for you today. We did the week 3 overreactions with Ethan Snow. In the introduction to that one, I accidentally called him Ethan Hawke, and then I had to cut it out, so the transition into the interview is a little rough. I want to assure you that Ethan Snow looks nothing like Ethan Hawke, but they are both very charming, lovely people to talk to. I've never talked to Ethan Hawke myself, but I've seen lots of interviews with him. So today I've got a special episode because during that one, we talked about Falmouth, and Falmouth's head coach reached out to me to say he would love to be on the show, and so we did that. Spencer Emerson, talked to him for a while, and I was going to do more of this in the intro, but we got into it in the episode. The story of UNLV's quarterback, let me make sure I'm getting his name right, Matthew Sluka. He announced he was going to use his redshirt season because he wasn't getting paid as much as he felt like he should have been paid, and apparently there's no contract, which seems insane. Kids always get a contract, have a paper trail of some kind. But what's interesting to me about this is how this reporting started, in that he announced he was going to redshirt 3 games into the season, and everyone piled on him like, oh, how could he do that? How could he quit on his team? Kids these days are so entitled. It's terrible. Blah, blah, blah. How this, culture of NIL is so terrible, and the kids are greedy, and everyone piling on. And then, maybe an hour later, maybe 2 hours later, the word came out that he had been promised $100,000 from one of the coordinators, and then they hadn't given him any of it. And then they were going to try to give him less money than that, like $3,000 a month or something, and it was going to end up being $88,000 less than he was promised. And so he rightfully said, no, I'm not doing that. We had a deal. No deal. I'm not burning through your availability for this. And I don't blame him. I mean, you promise someone $100,000 and you don't give it to him, you're not going to get what you thought you were getting in return. I think he's totally in his rights to do that. So anyway, we talked about that. We talked about Falmouth and their resurgence this year, and got into a lot of that stuff. A lot of great stuff in the interview. My kid crashed the party for a little bit, so he's making his debut in the podcast. Face is very dirty. I don't know how his face got that dirty, because it was pretty clean like 20 minutes before we started recording. Kids. Anyway, so it was any great episode. So right now we'll just go to that. We'll go to my interview with Falmouth head coach Spencer Emerson. All right, Spencer Emerson is here. Coach Emerson is the head coach of the Falmouth Navigators, who are, I think it's safe to say, the surprise team of the year so far. And earlier this week, Ethan and I were talking about how the turnaround was such a surprise, and I was like, oh, I should get someone from Falmouth on, and you reached out to me, and so here we are.
Yeah, well, you said you were wearing an old shirt, so we had to get you a new shirt, right? So
I did have an old shirt.
Be there, I think it's like 2 days, so either tomorrow or Friday. Get you
nice.
But yeah, definitely had to, chime in there and get you caught up to speed from a gear perspective. But
yeah.
Also, you mentioned you want to talk to somebody, and I think I want to be out there and letting people know what we're about. So I appreciate you having me on.
Sure. And your AD got me the original shirt, and I see James every year at the tournament. So it's great to have updated stuff, and you can give him grief that it's not him sending it to you, to me.
I'll give him some grief tomorrow. I can't wait.
All right, so you are the new head coach of Falmouth. Falmouth last year was 2-6. They were 60th in the power rankings, which is not great, and it's not where you expect Falmouth to be. And just to set the stage for people who don't remember the story or are unaware of it, Falmouth last year had to forfeit a game against Portland because they didn't have players. Participation numbers were low. That was a big surprise. The spreadsheet does not like that when teams have to forfeit. It's a whole mess. Mm-hmm. And then after the season, there was a petition, 22 of the 30 players petitioning to have head coach John Fitzsimmons removed. He'd been there 16 years. It's a little bit of a legend, as I understand it, in the Falmouth area. and that was a whole mess. The main wire got involved, which is never good. And so Coach Fitzsimmons resigned, in come you, and that's quite a place to take over a program.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I wasn't here last year. So I think that the beautiful part about the timing for me was, I moved back to Maine from Chicago in January. My wife and I wanted to move back home. I'm from the Lewis and Auburn area, from Maine originally, and just wanted to kind of, get a better quality of life than college football was offering. So, I had an opportunity to come here and kind of saw the opening kind of after it all went down. I wasn't here last year. I'm not familiar with the particulars of the situation. I think when the word you mentioned with Coach Fitzsimmons was legend, and I agree, because the way I knew him was just somebody who built Falmouth football. What went on, and things took their course, and the way things ended there is frankly none of my business and none of my concern. I'm a guy that really focuses on the next thing and really focusing on the future and how can we progress to get where we want to be as a football program. So people said to me, do you know what you're walking into? And transparently, no, I didn't know what I was walking into, because I really wasn't concerned with what I was walking into. I was concerned about what's going on currently and what's the plan for the future. And when I interviewed and had conversations with the committee, Principal Gowers, athletic director James Coffey, everybody spoke about, the plans for the future, and that was attractive to me. So that's why it made sense.
But that's much different than when you previously were a head coach at Poland, 2018, 2019. That's a much different thing to step into than whatever was happening in Poland.
Yeah, I think it was different. I think ultimately, I was young. I was 24 years old when I got hired in Poland. And I think they were looking for kind of some new energy and some new excitement. When I was 24, I had all the energy in the world, and was really, really just excited for the opportunity, frankly. And we went there and did some okay things. Our quarterback at Poland, Brady Downing, he's now on the staff at Falmouth. You know what I mean? He's coaching our quarterback, coaching our DBs, and doing a great job helping out. And, again, he's somebody who kind of understands the culture and what we're trying to do, and is a great asset. So I think, the difference is, being a little bit more seasoned, 5 years in college football and then coming back to high school football gives me, I think, a decent perspective. I think when I was at Poland, I think I was coaching for some sort of sight on climbing this ladder and making it, quote unquote. Now I'm coaching because I love to do it, and I'm excited to be there every day, as opposed to thinking about what's next. I'm very present. I'm very mindful of what we're doing every day. So I think it's just completely different me, completely different Spencers in both scenarios. But again, going in there, I wasn't very familiar with what happened, because frankly, I wasn't concerned with it. And I think anytime I take a gig or anytime I, take a coaching role, I'm always thinking about how to optimize it. How can we make it better? Where is it currently? What's the realistic steps to take, forward to get what we need, get to where we need to get to from a culture standpoint. So, so far we've done that at Falmouth. We're 3 weeks in, but I think ultimately things are headed in the right direction.
You are hitting all of my questions already, so this is problematic for my research. So let's talk about the ladder. So you were at Poland. You were a video assistant at Maine. Yeah. Then you're the head coach of Poland. Then you went to Bates, Georgetown, University of Chicago. So it looked like you were on that ladder.
Yeah.
What's the thinking, other than just it'd be nice to move back to Maine, to not try to keep going up on that ladder?
Yeah, I think the hard part about having a dream, right? And I was a kid who went to every little high school and said to my friends when I was 16, hey, I'm going to be an NFL football coach. And everybody kind of yeah, but what's your plan B? And I was like, I don't have one. It's kind of a windy road to get there. But ultimately, I think, coaching at the FCS level at Georgetown, keep in mind, I get into Georgetown. Patrick Ewing's the head basketball coach. Every other program in the building, it's a Big East. I'm living in downtown DC. I'm really kind of all hitting me at once. I think that was the moment where I recognized this is what it looks like at this level. Recruiting, 3 months on the road, a year where you're just not sleeping in your own bed. At one point, I was on 20-something flights in 40 days. I mean, it's crazy at that level. It's a lifestyle, right? So I think the hard part for me was, I always ask people this, and anybody I coach, anybody I talk to, what do you want? What's your goal? And what are you willing to give up to get that goal? And I think I asked myself that question, and I was willing to give up family time. When I moved to DC, I moved away from my fiance at the time. We didn't live together. She lived in New Hampshire. I didn't see my family for, 9 straight months. I didn't see my friends for a while. I missed weddings in family and friend situations. So I think it was one of those scenarios where, your head is down and you have your narrow line of sight to what you want to do, quote unquote, making it. And when they had the opportunity to be a coordinator at the University of Chicago, that was another step, right? Got there and, we had some success and were able to do some good things on offense. But ultimately, I was again kind of searching for that next thing and that fulfillment. And I had some opportunities. I had some Division III head coaching interviews and opportunities. Had an opportunity to join an FBS staff, the Power 5 level. But when I realized that wasn't the goal, that next step up wasn't attractive to me, I had to really reflect and say, all right, what do I want right now? And what I wanted was quality of life. I wanted to be back home near my family. And I wanted to coach football in some capacity. Truthfully, had there been no openings in Maine that made sense, I would have taken the fall off and been completely content. But this happened at the right time for me, and kind of got lucky as far as timing goes. Just what I was looking for.
Speaking of family, my kid's trying to interrupt me. Reese, come here.
That's great.
Come here. Get your dirty face over here. Mommy's in the workshop. Get on the video. Say hi.
What's up, man?
Hi.
How you doing?
He can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
You say hi?
What's up, buddy?
Hello.
What's your name?
Reese.
Reese. That's a cool name, Reese. I'm Spencer. Good to meet you, Reese.
All right. Mommy's in the workshop, okay? Close the door on your way out. All right.
I love it.
Sorry about that. I was trying to shoo him, and then I'm like, he's talking about the importance of family. This is probably a bad time to shoot the kid.
Yeah, no, of course. Have to.
All right. So where was I? So you're at the University of Chicago, and then coming back to Maine. What was? So if you're going, they always talk about in the NFL. They talk about you're a head coach, and then you're back to being an assistant, and then you're a head coach again. And they did this. Belichick did this, and it's always better the second time around. What did you take from the assistant gigs that you wouldn't have been able to apply if you hadn't been a head coach first? Does that make sense?
That's a great question. I think the broad term is perspective. And the nuance of that was when I was a 24-year-old head high school coach, I really only knew what Jack Cosgrove and Mark Harriman taught me at UMaine and Bates, right? I didn't really have my own kind of, thoughts and ideas on culture. I was kind of trying to be what I knew to be successful, I guess, in my limited experience. Then leaving being a head coach and going to college level as a full-time assistant, you're really thinking about all angles, right? You kind of understand some. So in a staff meeting, a head coach might make a call and say, hey, we're going to do this. As a position coach, you're probably thinking, well, what does that make sense? You're kind of questioning it. But when you have head coaching experience, regardless of it being high school or college, you have the perspective to say, all right, they're looking at it from a different lens. They're looking at the macro level, right? I'm looking at my position room, the 7, 8, 9 guys I'm coaching, recruiting my area. They're thinking about everything, fundraising, recruiting, every position group, special teams, donors, alumni, upper administration. Like there's so many different angles that they have to think about constantly in their head that I think my thought process was more like, how do I make their life easier? So then coming back to high school, kind of with that experience, now it's about how do I hire people that just kind of understand what the ultimate goal is. And I think being able to, been able to put together, we have some really good coaches at Falmouth that are, have a lot of different levels of experience, but coming in there, we're all kind of rowing the boat in the same direction, for lack of a better term. We're able to kind of, have that perspective and coach kids in a way that has a heightened level of accountability, but it's truly relationship based. I mean, I always tell the guys when I met them, each person I interviewed, I said, hey, listen, we're going to love our players. So you have to not know them, what their favorite play is. You need to know what's home like for them. What are interested in when they leave here? What's going to be the reason they have a great fall? So I think we've trying to invested a lot of time in that. I think I think the players understand how much we care about them, and I think it's showing on the field.
Was that what's the way to say this? Was that more important being invested in them as people coming into what you came into? Or I mean, obviously you're going to try to do that anyway, but does it make a bigger impact coming into a fraught situation than if you would just say taken over at pick a school?
Sure. Yeah, that's a fair question. I would say I don't think I would approach it any differently depending on where I am on my lens, from my perspective in my chair, everywhere I've been. I'm a big believer in you have to leave it better than you found it. So whether that looks like from a culture standpoint, and for me, it's I tell everybody, you coach them hard, but you have to love them harder. And I think for me going in, based on the situation, again, I wasn't super privy to it. I did not do a bunch of research. I read an article. I had a few people call me and kind of warn me. I took it with a grain of salt, and I went in with a very positive perspective. So I think for me,
shocked that people called you to warn you.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where in my chair, I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of what are the reasons this is going to be successful, right? I'm looking for reasons things can happen, not reasons they won't. So I approach any relationship really in my life with a very positive lens. And how can I, get to know this person as a human? And I always say, coach the person, not the product, right? And we're very transparent in our locker room. Like, your value on our team and in our program is not tied to how good you are at football. That's a bonus, right? So I think making sure they understand they feel valued, they feel a part of it, regardless of how many reps they get on Friday night, was really priority number one. That would have been my priority regardless of the school. It might resonate a little bit with guys, a little bit more, just because maybe they had an experience that wasn't so fun. But right now we're just trying to make football enjoyable, and I think that starts with the relationship.
Sure. And so because it's crucial, if you're going to do something like this, you've got to get buy-in from the players. Like, that's the very first thing, even more important than getting buy-in from the parents. Right. Is getting buy-in from them. And how long did it take you to identify the leaders in the locker room and the guys who you needed to win over first, and then everybody else would follow?
Yeah, I think I got hired in March, and that's the beginning. The end of winter sports, the beginning of spring sports. I was told, hey, there's a couple players that played previously that they took a year off or took a couple years off, and they're thinking about playing. And my job was just to get to know these people. So for me, we had a team meeting, introduced myself. We had some people that were like interested show up. I kind of presented on my culture, what I believe in, and what this program was going to be. And I think it resonated with a few people that might have been on the fence. So I think the first impression was crucial. I told them, hey, listen, my goal is to make football enjoyable, for me to have your back, and for us to have I always say, have a blast playing ball. And I think it resonated with them initially. Then, you kind of watch how things unfold. You kind of see who are the older guys in the group. We opened the meeting up to 8th graders that were at the middle school back in March, and they came over to the high school that afternoon, and kind of saw some young guys, excited about the opportunity to play in high school. And, I have to give a lot of credit to, the spring sports, where we're able to, have a lot of success. So baseball's in the regional final. Lacrosse wins the state championship. Like, what those coaches are doing, what Coach DeAndrea and Coach Barton were doing, is showing kids how to win and showing kids what it takes to be successful in high school athletics, regardless of the sport. So when I kind of, I was very, present, I went to the lacrosse games, went to the baseball games. I'm talking to Coffee on the sideline. Hey, who's that kid? Does he play? Has he ever played? Doing my homework on who these kids were, know them. And then you kind of realize right away, okay, Indy Backman's an all-conference player who goes about his business. He's a Division I lacrosse commit. He's a natural leader, whether he speaks or not, right? People follow him. So you identify him as a leader. Then you learn about, hey, there's some guys, Owen Bombardier is a senior captain for us. I think only other sport he does is wrestling. He's in the weight room after school. He's talking about how we're going to get guys here. He's telling me, hey, coach, you got to talk to this guy. So I think those identifying the leaders early on was pretty easy. And all the returning players I met with, right? I sat down with them. Hey, what are your goals? What do you want out of the season? If the new coach coming in has to be one thing, what is that thing? And really just listening to them. Took a lot of notes while they spoke, and really just heard and gave them a chance to speak from a fresh perspective with someone who didn't know them and had no preconceived notions of them. So I think it took the spring to, we opened up the weight room and started off with 10 guys, and eventually it was 12. And all of a sudden we had 20 guys in the weight room. And then, that was almost around the amount of players they had previously. Then we had signups. The roster got up to 47, and now the roster's at 52. You know what I mean? I make the joke all the time. Sundays they're playing with 53. We're just one down. But I think it's really important for the kids to know that, like, again, I think this was more about it was more about building something that people want to be a part of, and the vehicle of that's football. But right now it's just building a program that, young people at Falmouth want to be a part of. And so far that we've been able to do that.
It sounds a little bit like you were Gene Hackman in Hoosiers. Was there a Jimmy Chitwood you had to convince to play? And did you have to go, look, I don't care if you play or not?
It wasn't negative at all. We are two of our really successful players that have had great starts to the season are Joey and Giovanni Garrett. They're both Division I lacrosse kids. Division I, they're actually lacrosse All-Americans. I believe Gio was the player of the year in Class A lacrosse. And they were, they played previously. Joey played in middle school. Gio played as a freshman, I believe. And they were unsure. They came and met me. I met their parents, and I think we just kind of hit it off as far as personality. They're great kids. And I think the way I go about it, I have a little bit more of a modern approach. We have a blast. You know what I mean? I like to have fun. I don't subscribe to the idea that football has to be this like head down, negative, do what you're told, get behind the line. We have that accountability and time in place for that. But I'm the one playing music during pregame, dancing in the locker room with them. You know what I mean? I want them to know, I'm the football coach, but I also am not too far removed from them as people. So, I wear the same sneakers as them, listen to the same music as them. You know what I mean? So I'm only 31 years old. So I hope to show them that like you can be a person in an authoritative figure, but you have to pick and choose, because I'm a big believer that if all your words become staunch and negative and aggressive, eventually it just becomes noise, right? You become the Charlie Brown teacher. I think if I reserve those moments for when there's heightened level of urgency, then they actually hear what I'm saying. Because I'm a big believer in people don't hear what you say, they hear how you say it. So our approach is, we're very, very mindful of our approach. And I think that was attractive to student athletes that were thinking about playing.
I mean, if you're all negative, then eventually they just don't hear it. It's
Correct.
With anything, it's like if every movie is good, then no movie is good, because there are bad movies and there are good movies, and you have to have degrees of that.
Right. Exactly.
So one thing, and you hit on this a little bit, is if this happens, I think one advantage you have here is if this happens in Falmouth, it's a lot different than if it happens in Millinocket and there's like a mill town that the mill just closed, and numbers are way down. Talk about that a little bit, because it's very much a advantage, and it's a cultural advantage, it's a economic advantage. And people, James Coffey jokes that, about how everybody sort of hates Falmouth because they're Falmouth. But it had to have been a big factor in this.
Yeah, I think, well, it comes down to, peace of mind, right? And I think anytime you take a job, you evaluate the situation, right? This thing, this entity, this football program, all right, what does it look like at an optimal level? Like if everything goes well, what does that look like? And I think for us, we're in a situation where I think Falmouth might be labeled as, soft and entitled, and all those words that get thrown around, an area that might have, parents that have done well for themselves from a financial perspective. We use that as a weapon. Like, hey, they think you're soft. They want to. They think you're.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're in B North, man. We're traveling past Waterville, half our schedule, right? So
why are you in B North?
That's a great question that but for us, it's like, hey, we're these entitled kids from Cumberland County. So now we have to go earn our respect. We talk a lot about respect. And sometimes I say all the time, you got to earn your respect between the whistles. And I think that's one of those things where, we've been able to really develop a mentality where we're going to show people who we are and eliminate the narratives and the preconceived notions. I think the idea that, you'll hear kind of narratives surrounding certain parts of Maine. I don't know. I'm from Lewiston, Auburn, where that's labeled a certain way. I went to school at the University of Maine, where the Bangor area is labeled a certain way. But I'm a big believer kids are kids. And when you get special kids in a locker room that are committed to the mission, you're going to have success regardless of what preconceived notions there are about the area.
Okay, so B North. Let's talk about your season so far. You're in B North, and it's a little bit of a hornet's nest up there. You've got Meso, you've got Cony, you've got who else? Lawrence, who you have to finish with Lawrence. Is that your second to last game or your last game? You go Lawrence. You finished Lawrence and Meso, which seems like that'll be fun or very hard. So you're in here. Your defense, you have the number one defense so far in the state in terms of scoring. You held Cony was scoring 37.5 points a game, and this was the thing that flagged me. And then you held him to 7. Like how do you get a defense gelled that quickly? You've given up 7 points in 3 games.
Yeah, well, I think it starts with, we have a get to, not have to mindset. Like, and I think the way you shape the way we think about things is like, we get to condition, we get to lift, we get to grind. And I think getting them to believe that and buy into that is critical. The second part is like, we play with a fanatical effort. Like we play, like the only way to describe it is just absolutely like pin our ears back and let it rip. We tell them all the time, let it rip. If you make a mistake, make it 100 miles an hour. And I tell them, hey, there is a such thing as a good missed tackle. If you run through the backfield and the guy misses and a team is going to swarm and 10 guys come clean it up, that's a good miss because you went 100 miles an hour. So we're instilling in them this swarm mentality. We swarm to the football. We're very, very aggressive in our demeanor. So we're going to blitz, we're going to move, we're going to stunt. But also like, we have the mindset of like putting our athletes in the best position possible. So I think, I said to them early on, we have to be able to win a game in every way, whether that's going to be running the football, whether that's throwing the football, whether that's stopping the run, whether that's stopping the pass. So we're very mindful of our approach. But we play really, really hard, man. These kids play super hard and we practice super hard. Like today, it's not, today we're preparing for a big game that I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, but like we start practice with the juice drill. We have 5 stretch lines that come out. We do our Falmouth jacks, and then those 5 lines get on the 5-man sled and we push it around the field for 20 minutes. Like it's not like by accident that we're aggressive. We're aggressive in our approach. And I think we're very, very transparent about that with the kids. It's like, hey, this is what it takes. Here's the standard, right? And
Hmm.
by Friday night, we got to get there. So defensively, and in our defensive coordinator, Dylan Rotkoff, he was at Yarmouth last year where they had a very good season, made the jump from 8-man up to with us at Falmouth. And he's just really good at game planning. He's very meticulous with the detail in which he watches film. Me and him are in constant communication. It seems like, all day, every day to make sure this thing's tightened up. But, I was a defensive coordinator at Old Town High School and Lewiston High School when I was really, really young, before my first stint at Bates. So I think me and him kind of share this passion for like just playing super hard. And mistakes are going to happen, but if they're honest mistakes and they're with fanatical effort, we can live with those. And we just had some really, really good game plans mixed with some really great effort. I think that's resulted in us being able to get some stops. But again, we don't. I liked it better when people were like, "Oh man, you're not going to be good," because that's the mentality we want to have. You know what I mean? We don't
Yeah.
want to like, "Oh, you have the number one defense in the state." I don't know. I don't really keep a track where we rank in the state as far as defense. All I know is that we're trying to stop the team from getting a first down right now.
Yeah, I mean, like those first 2 wins, it was like, oh, isn't that nice? Falmouth is winning some games. That's great. That's a nice little story. And then you 21-7 against Cony, and I was like, whoa, okay. So that's that puts. But now, like you said, now you've got a spotlight on you, and
Yeah.
you're going into a big game.
Yeah, and I think we talk about it, and I said to the guys yesterday, actually, it's like you earn the right to play in big football games, because if you're not competitive, no one considers your game big. They consider it like, oh, they're playing tonight. People don't even recognize it. So we earn the right to play in big games. I think the part of the it's part of the blessing of not being in the league before. I don't have preconceived notion like who's who and who was going to be good. I watched the film from last year and look at who was coming back and said, okay, they have talent. And I know a lot of these teams are very well coached. I think there's great coaching in B North. But I think right now for us, it's like the most important thing is the next thing. You got to go 1-0 in the next thing we're doing. And I think we've had that approach. And I think we've been able to really dial in on what's our job for this rep, this one play, what's our job. And I think if we stack up enough positive reps, then we find ourselves in a good spot. I'm a big believer that the scoreboard's the barometer, right? That's going to tell us which way the wind's blowing a little bit as far as like how well we're doing. But if we just grind every rep and win this play, it allows us to really have a short memory, both good and bad, right? If a good play happens, doesn't matter to lock back in. If a good play happens, so what now? But if a bad play happens, that's okay because we got the next rep, the next opportunity. And I think they're very bought into that. So it's allowed us to have some success for sure.
Do you think it's an advantage that you're not looking at a game like, oh, geez, Cony, or oh, geez, Lawrence, because you just don't know? Or is it that you were like at the University of Chicago and you're like, Cony?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not someone who ever like, I make me and my friends joke around a lot about like movie quotes, right? And it's like, remember the Titans when he's like, I don't scratch unless my head itches, I don't dance unless I hear music. Like it's just one of those things where like, okay, who's the opponent? What's their talent level? What's their game plan? How do we counteract that? And I think that like you can get caught up in big names and big brands and great coaches and great talent, or you can try your best to come up with a game plan that makes sense for that game. And every game's different and every situation's different, So I think I'm not really caught up in like the name or the school, whatever. I'm more so like, hey, I tell the guys, us at our best can beat anybody. So like, that's the mentality we have. And we're just trying to get to our best every play.
What's funny is your description of your defense reminds me of Coney's defense a couple years ago when TJ Maines was coaching them, and they just were pressed. They would press. They played 100 miles an hour, and they would just sub in 5 guys every time, and it was just unrelenting.
Yeah,
and it sort of sounds like that's what you're doing in the football version of it.
For sure, definitely. I think we're trying our best to instill confidence in our guys and put them in positions that are good, but understand, we challenge them a lot. Hey, you're gonna play man coverage versus a really good receiver, or hey, we're gonna play zone versus a really good quarterback, and we challenge them to see if they can answer the call. And so far, their effort has matched what we've asked them, and hopefully we can continue to take steps.
All right, so this week you've got Freiburg. It is not quite the game of the day. I thought it was going to be game of the day, but it's not. It's let me see if I can bring it up real quick. Who is actually the game? No, it's the wrong tab. I think it's Marshwood. Anyway, you missed it by like a tiny bit.
Sure.
Okay. But they are averaging 35.7 points a game. That's more than Cony. That's roughly what Cony was averaging when you played that, when you faced them. You're a very slight underdog in the game according to the computer, so that you might be glad to hear that. You sound like a coach who would love to not be favored.
Yeah.
Without saying anything that's going to get you on their bulletin board.
Mhm.
What's the approach to Freiburg?
Well, they do a lot of good things. When you think about their offense, they have two very good backs who both they run zone game and they do a great job. Getting first level combinations and getting up to linebackers and allowing those running backs to kind of cut back and cut vertically. They're very, very aggressive up front. They do a great job in pass protection as well. They have, a whole numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. All the 1 through 4 single digits can all run, catch, jump. They catch verticals, they catch jet sweeps, they go jet to run ISO. They do a lot of good things offensively. And the quarterback's a cool character. He stays pretty poised. He can pump fake, reset his feet, and get the ball downfield. And they've been able to roll teams because they can score in a lot of different ways. They can score through the air, they can score in the zone run game, they can get into gap scheme, they can pull. And they have some legit linemen. They have a gentleman who's a legitimate Division I player who has D1 offers, who I had to call UMaine and verify, hey, you're recruiting this kid, huh? He's good. And they're like, oh yeah, he's the real deal, we want him. So I think for us, being able to be mindful that they can do a lot of different things, we have to be very sound. So I think they've done a great job. Coach Turner's done a fantastic job of getting them prepared. The film we've seen of them, they kind of can take what the defense gives them. So it's our job to come up with a plan to kind of corral and see what we can do and be sound versus a lot of different things, because they can hit you in many different ways. They don't have necessarily one thing they do particularly well. They've been able to do a lot of things well. And then their defense is aggressive, man. They tackle, they rush the passer, they play aggressive coverage. They're really talented on the outside, so they played some man, and then they've been able to be multiple and change up some things. So we'll have our hands full for sure. They're talented. We feel like we're talented, and we feel like we're excited for the opportunity. I think it's going to be a really, really good test. This is going to tell us a lot about our ball club, a lot about our football team this Friday.
For sure. Do you want to make a prediction and get on the bulletin board, or no?
No predictions. I can tell you we're going to play. I know we're going to play hard. I can tell you that much. I don't know the score. The score is just, again, that's the barometer. That's how we measure. But if we've had a great week of practice, had a fantastic practice today. We understand the challenge, and we've talked to them about the opportunity in front of them. The privilege it is to play in a big football game. But one thing I can guarantee you is our effort will be through the roof.
Okay, one more. I'm going to pivot a little bit. In basketball, at least, it's the youth program is everything.
Yeah.
And the feeder system, and I imagine it's more so in football because numbers. How do you get the youth re-engaged? Is it as simple as getting them at the games, like because when you're taking over a program and trying to rebuild?
Yeah, I don't think it's simple. I wouldn't say that. I think it's about being present. So it starts with being present and being available. So our players are the refs for the youth flag games, right? Our players are at the middle school games, and we're actually mindful of their schedule so that we can adjust ours to make sure we can be present at their events. Myself, our middle school team played Saturday right after we played Friday, and we got out of film and we all went down and we're on the sideline and we're hooting and hollering for them. Being present. And I've said this when I got hired, and I really believe in it. We're all Falmouth football players, K through 12. We just happen to be at different schools. We're all on the same team. And I think building that, building the program has a lot to do with just being present and also taking a invested interest in them as people before they even get to high school. We have great coaches at the youth and middle school level. Our boosters the boosters that support us are the same that support all the way down to the flag football teams. So we're building community in a way that's just built through relationships and through being visible, right? For me, I traveled to Oak Hill to watch our middle school team play. I'm going to, different towns to watch our youth teams play because they need to know that we support them and we know who they are. I don't want to meet new freshmen. I want to be able to coach kids that I already have a relationship with. So I think that's the goal. And I think, so far the youth coaches and the boosters have been fantastic in making sure that those kids are prepared and have everything they need and every opportunity to play competitive football. And then as the high school coach, my job is to make sure our players understand their responsibility as community members to support the youth players, and then understanding that, they're going to look back and be appreciative of the fact that they were able to build relationships with people in the community that were younger than them. So I think it's, it's a cycle, right? And I think it starts at the top with me being present, being visible, and forming authentic relationships with kids long before they get into the high school program.
Yeah, I think that's so essential. You've got to, in a way, demystify the idea of this head coach who, if you're not meeting this person and you're just watching them on the sidelines, you just see them yelling at the refs
Right.
and whatever, and you've got to like break through and become an actual person to
Yeah,
this 10-year-old.
for sure. And not only you got to become an actual person, but you have to take an interest in them. Like, being the football coach is, I've been places where being the football coach holds this mystique and stuff like that. That's not what Falmouth is. Me, the football coach, I'm just the guy that gets to make the decision if we go for it on fourth down or not on Friday night. Other than that, I'm just a guy. You know what I mean? So, like, for us, we're talking to the youth players, and I'm getting to know them and not being at their games. And I'm really, really excited about our middle school group right now. They're super talented. They're super dominant. I think we got like 15 eighth graders coming up, which with 9 seniors will put our roster from, if we go 43, at 58. So we'll be pushing 60 next year. So like, we're excited about the future. But the big thing is like, it doesn't stop, right? We got to get our 5th and 6th graders that are going to be middle schoolers soon and things like that. So, very mindful of that. But it's so much demystifying it, but also like being able to be like, hey, one, remember their names. Two, like allow them to be a part of what we do. We have water boys that are youth players. The last day before the hands-off period, we had a youth night. Our goal was to get every football player K through 12 on the same field, and our guys coaching the youth guys. And we were able to do that outside of a few guys that were on vacation. So I think, again, taking the intentionality to building relationships with the young kids and let them see our staff, let them see our players, let them see what we're about, I think is going to pay dividends in the future.
Very cool. Since this is technically a basketball podcast, I have to ask you some basketball questions.
Love it. Let's do it.
All right. So how essential is it to have multi-sport athletes as opposed to just playing basketball or just playing football or whatever?
I think it's super essential. I'll tell you from a recruiting standpoint, both at Georgetown and at Chicago, when we would meet on a kid and have a staff meeting, we'd ask, what else does he play? Right. And our recruiting brochures when I was at Georgetown, it was like, hey, we love quarterbacks that play baseball. We love DBs. We love DBs and corners that play basketball. We like running backs that, play lacrosse. Like what are the transferable skills? And then what's that commitment piece, that accountability piece that comes along with being part of a team? I think was crucial for us. So I love that our guys are multi-sport athletes. Like, I love that we have All-American lacrosse players that want to play football their senior year and can come out and understand what it takes physically and mentally to be a successful athlete. So not only do I love it for our program, I know that college coaches at the next level look for multi-sport athletes specifically.
So the positions for basketball, it's DB, corner, receivers, probably.
Well, think about it. When you're a DB, you're playing, right? You're in that, you're pedaling out, you're running backwards, kind of like you're playing full court press and defense, right? When you're a receiver, you have to be able to move on the fly and change direction. So think about crossing over, going in and out, going around a screen the same way you would go around a route, like a rub route. When you think about lacrosse, you think about running down the field, taking contact, running through hits, and being able to finish like running back, right? When you think about like D lineman and O lineman, hey, if you wrestle, you can grapple, grip strength, upper body extension, things like that, right? So like there's a lot of transferable skills that go on. And for us, it was very like basketball players. Like if a kid can get in a stance and guard 90 feet, I think he'll be able to guard for 4 seconds before the rush gets there, DB, right? So like
right.
That's kind of the transferable skills that we look for. And it's not a perfect science, but it's just things that can add to a recruiting profile to know that a kid's doing those things in a different sport.
The classic one is probably the quarterback who's also the point guard.
Yeah. When we find a quarterback who was like point guard and a pitcher in baseball, you're like, okay, he's got the big three. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
So when I go to games, I always end up talking to the basketball coaches, and the joke is, how worried are you that your star player is going to get hurt playing football? Yeah. Do you get any of that from Halligan?
No, Halligan's been unbelievably supportive. That guy is just it's funny, right? Because like I don't know. When I think about coaches and I think about what it takes to do to win games every year's a new year. And then I think about what it's like to like coach a season. And then this guy coaches back-to-back seasons and does it in both sports year in, year out. Like think about the mental and physical exhaustion that takes, right? Especially out of a man his age too now, right? And I'm a big believer, like you can watch a game and kind of get a sense for a program, but when you watch a team practice, like I could tell you, like, I don't know anything about lacrosse. Watching Dave Barton's lacrosse practices, I knew they'd be a very good team. And they just so happened they went on to win the state championship. Watching Halligan's like soccer practice, I can tell you that they're going to be a competitive team from the level of organization, the level of effort, and the level of detail the coaches are giving, right? So like Halligan has been unbelievably supportive to me, and I'm just happy to be able to soak up as much game from him as I can because, he's done it in 2 sports for a long time. Very successful.
Oh, yeah. He's a legend.
Yeah.
How, like, what sort of things, like when you go and talk to another coach, and you always see this, like Missoula goes to like the Red Sox game and is talking to Cora
Yeah.
and things like that. Like, what are you looking for when you're talking to a coach from another sport?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. Like I'm looking for like their demeanor, how they handle certain situations, right? Because when you're the head coach, right, whether you want to or not, you're representing something bigger than yourself in really every conversation publicly. So I think for me, it's like how they carry themselves. I'm a huge fan of coaches that can like be present somewhere and demand a certain level of respect in the way they carry themselves. So, what I try to look for is like, hey, how do they handle conflict? If you're able to watch them in a moment, whether that's in a game or at a practice where things might not be going swimmingly, all right, how do they handle that? What's their tonality like? I pride myself in having a really, I'm pretty observant, try to have great attention to detail. Like, all right, what words do they use?
Mm.
How they handle a kid that didn't necessarily respond in a way that's ideal, and like how do their players address them? You know what I mean? And how do other people address them? So I think, being able to be mindful of like, what successful coaches do daily. What do successful coaches do when there's no, channel whatever news at practice? What do they do when it's a walkthrough and they're coming off a win? How do you handle playing an opponent that you're definitely more talented than in the model or the ranking, whatever that is? Like how do you approach things with different, external factors? So that's the stuff I look for, and I've been fortunate to be around some good coaches that kind of, I think led by example, that I've been able to kind of, steal things from here and there.
Are you ever like at a lacrosse practice going, I kind of like that drill they're running?
Well, it's what I like is the organization of it, right? Because like you think about
Hmm.
lacrosse, I'm fascinated with the sport. I really am. Like it's so many different moving parts in one. In like to me, I'm fascinated that they get in and out of drills so efficiently, right? So like
Hmm.
for example, like when we got hired, our staff went up this summer to watch UMaine's preseason and like talking about how they get in and out of drills, right? When I was in Chicago, we practiced like hard, man. I'm talking like on the watch, like 20,000 steps, heart rate up. Like you felt like you played a football game after practice because practice has to be harder than the game, right? So like
Right.
it was one of those things where like, then we went to Boston College and watched Bill O'Brien's staff, and like they are like the way they practice is unbelievably organized. Now, when you have 50 staff members, it's a little bit different. But like, so like when I watch Barton's practices for lacrosse, I'm just amazed at how efficiently they get stuff done. There's not a wasted minute, right? There, somebody's servicing a drill or getting the rep or fielding the ball to make sure the next line can go, and like that level of cohesion with efficiency mixed with effort is why they're state championships, why they're state champions, right? So like that to me was fascinating. And I was more thinking about like, all right, how do we get in and out of drills in our practices? And how do we get our kids to understand like, all right, what they're doing next, right? Hey, we're getting in the next period. It looks like this. So I think, been able to steal a little bit of that, but just the organization piece is the thing I'm fascinated with the most.
Very cool. All right. So I asked every guest, other than the people I've had onto these overreaction posts,
Yeah.
shot clock. Where do you stand on the shot clock?
Oh, I'm a proponent. I would love to see a shot clock. I would love to see a shot clock
Beautiful.
point of I like execution. I'm a football guy, right? So it's funny. One of my best friends, used to coach basketball at Lewiston High School. Now he coaches at the Pomfret School down in Connecticut. And I say to him all the time, every time we talk, I'm like, dude, like I'm very like I get to, control what 11 dudes do on a play, right?
Yeah.
Basketball, you get them in a set, and then it's just like see where the cards lie, So like
It's
for
chaos.
me, for me with shot clock, I think it forces you to get into more sets. I think it
Hmm.
forces you to kind of design more, and I'm a play design guy, so I think that's great. So I also think at the end of the day, like when I think about it from like a long-term sustainability standpoint, like these kids are going on to be, college level players and eventually, as we see currently, pro level players. So like in my mind, I think there has to be some type of foresight to say, all right, are we setting our kids up to be successful at the next level? Because I think right now, Maine's at a point, surely on the women's game earlier, but now where we have some real talent on the hardwood in Maine.
Oh yeah.
And being able to set ourselves up infrastructure wise with shot clocks and the way we kind of go about our business organizationally as a state can hopefully keep that talent ascending to the point where even maybe some of those players consider staying. So that's the when I think about not to get too philosophical, when I think about the long term how to optimize things, I think a shot clock would do good. I also understand the financial implications, and someone's got to run it, and people got to get coached up on it. It is a lot of moving parts, but I think the investment would be worth it in the long term.
I mean, if you look at the Mr. Basketball race for this year, the
Mhm.
top, I think, 6 people in that race went prep
Yeah.
because they had to go prep, starting with
Yeah.
Cooper. And Cooper's going to go prep because you'd be crazy not to in that situation. But there's some guys who probably would have stayed,
Yeah.
and would have put together some really good careers if,
Right.
we were able to get them more ready
Yeah.
for Division 1 or Division 2 or whatever it is.
And it's hard because I don't know, like, again, I don't know if like, I don't know the answer about like retention state of Maine, but I do know that like kids now, especially again, we have so much information available and you can reach a college coach via DM in a second. So like we have kids that have high aspirations. And I think as a state, I think it's our job to prepare them to the best of our ability. But as a UMaine Black Bear alum, I just hope Ace Flag goes to UMaine. So that's my shameless plug for
that would be very cool. I'm really hoping he does, but to go to the best place for your situation and everything. But I think it would be very, very cool to. I think what they should do is they should get as many of those those Maine United guys to go to UMaine.
Yeah.
And get 3 or 4 of them there and see if we can finally get in the tournament.
Oh my God!
For the love of God, make the tournament.
I remember it's 2000 and I want to say 14. And me and my buddy Chris we're at the Cross Insurance Center watching UMaine basketball play. We're one of 20 people in the stands. And I just remember Coach Walsh like coaching them up, doing a great job, brought in a bunch of talent. And we thought this is going to be it. And then things happen and guys transfer and stuff like that. But I want Maine basketball to be good very badly. I'm a huge Maine Black Bear fan in all sports, not just football, but obviously hockey's on the up. But I think it's just one of those things where it's the cart and horse theory, right? So like, if you get Ace, maybe he gets some high level teammates to come with him. So it's like, but you got to get one to get the next one. It's hard, man. Basketball is it's tricky. Like I said before, I don't know how those guys do it. They do a great job coaching them up. But I think like for me, football is more my lane because I think it's a little more predictable.
It's a little bit like school choice. If you're in an area that has a lot of school choice and your program's been bad for a really long time, why would you choose to send your really good basketball player kid to that school unless that school has really good academics? If you got 4 or 5 places you can go, then maybe go to the one that's always in the tournament.
That's the thing. It's again, I always used to think about it in recruiting, right? Like, so there's like a lot of factors that go into it, and I can speak about it from a football standpoint of like, all right, how many schools do you have to pass to get to ours, right? If you're somebody that wants to stay fairly regional, what do those schools offer academically, financial aid wise, scholarship wise, all those things? Now, like, what's the player experience like? And the hard part when you're not winning is when kids get to campus, they're not seeing players who are just like dying to be here. They just love it. They can't get enough of it, right? Because I always say like coaches are great recruiters, but players on your team are the best recruiters because they can talk about the real life experience going on, right? So I think that like when I think about recruiting at a place like Maine, Coach Kaz on football used to say all the time, like, we want a gritty kid. We want a kid who is mad they didn't get recruited by Boston College. That's mad that they aren't able to go play Power 5 right now. That maybe, doesn't love being in the city and wants to be in gritty, gray, orange. You know what I mean? Like, it was a cultural thing. Like the black hole defense is a cultural thing. And you had a group of players that had chips on their shoulders for real. I mean, there was real talented guys that went up there. The hard part now is like, what does retention look like? Because now we're in a space where if you're really good, Joe Fagnano is a top tier quarterback at Maine, and then his head coach goes to UConn, and in his brain, what's a better experience? You know what I mean? And again, that's up to the individual athlete. But I think the hard part, it's more about, how do you get them and how do you keep them? We're in a space now where like, you think about there are real like general managers being hired in college athletics, and their job is to help manage the current roster. So it's not enough to recruit good players. Now, what does retention look like? What is the reason they're going to stay? What are for schools, I'm fortunate to work at academic schools where you have a degree that has high earning potential. But if you're Orno, how are you going to convince a kid to drive past however many schools on 95 to get to Orno, right? So like, what does that look like long term? I don't have the answers because I'm not in the building. But I think it's just, it's a question that I think a lot of schools are asking. And you mix in, financial compensation. And I think now you talk about what the community looks like, and it comes down circling back through, where your resources are for the place you coach and stuff like that. So there's a lot of moving factors that really weren't a factor in the past. And I think now, especially a sport like basketball, that's so mobile. Don't know what that looks like long term. I'm not sure what the first step to creating that, culture that breeds people wanting to be there. I'm not sure what that looks like.
I think one thing you don't do is promise a quarterback $100,000 in NIL money and then not give it to them. I think
I
maybe
wish
you don't do that.
the funniest part of this is I'm at Georgetown in 2021, and we're going to play at Holy Cross. They're loaded. Matt Sluka's the quarterback. He is an absolute dude. I mean, that quarterback. I mean, he is a ball player. Like, I'm not just saying that. Like, I remember they tried to recruit him at Georgetown. He ended up going to Holy Cross. He won 4 conference titles. I mean, he's a dude. So that situation. That situation is tough, man. And I know Brennan Mary and the OC over there. So I hope they're all right, and I hope the situation doesn't become bigger than it needs to be. I don't know what that looks like. NIL
Yeah.
tricky, man, because the NIL stuff's tricky because without any real tangible like rules surrounding it, it's hard to really enforce, right?
Yeah.
And there was a tweet that went out that talked about like what someone called it, like a drug deal gone bad, right? Like you can't call the police when that happens because there's no one to help
Yeah.
you there, right? And that might be, I don't mean to be too provocative, but I think it's just one of those things where it's really hard to pinpoint what those kind of safeguards look like, because when the money's coming from a collective and the collective is about brand deals and influence, there's just so many different moving pieces there. But I don't know about that situation. I can tell you that Matt Sluka is an absolute ball player. I witnessed it live. I've seen the film. It was preparing for that kid was a lot of late nights in the film room. But I'm interested to see where he lands. I think the tricky part about the situation at UNLV is like, what does that look like? How do schools protect themselves from that happening? And I think one is making sure you have all funds available, when you're recruiting, right? They have to be real tangible things. They can't just be words, but also like protect yourself from the standpoint of like, have contracts, man. Like, you know what I mean? There's NIL.
I can't believe there wasn't a contract.
That's the thing that's crazy. And in my, I'm thinking to myself, I think about all the scenarios and I'm thinking, if that's a transfer from Alabama, does he go there if there's not a contract? But
Right.
coming from an FCS program where you're getting excited to play at the higher level, it's Vegas, right? It's not Worcester. It's UNLV. You're playing at
Slightly different.
the brand new $1 billion stadium. It's not, even though I will say Fitton Field and Holy Cross, they packed that thing. But I think it's one of those things where like there has to be safeguards on both for both parties. And without that, I don't know if this is the last time we'll see something like that.
I doubt it.
I think people always, it's almost weird, right? I think in college sports right now, it's very like, oh, the world's changing. That's just how it is, adapt or die. But also like, we're in a weird situation where like bowl games have now turned into like backup quarterback auditions. And then, the NIT kind of turns into what team has the best culture and cares the most, right? And doesn't opt
Right.
out. And, there's so many factors that have never been seen before. I think, the powers that be would be a little bit more proactive and preventative as opposed to reactive when things like this happen. So I
mean,
know.
it's Vegas. It's possible they had the money, and then next at 4 a.m, they suddenly didn't have the money.
The best tweet was from I think it was a Barstool account. I forget what it was. Like, this is surely not the first time someone went to Vegas and left without the money they expected to make.
Exactly. Exactly.
But Matt Sluka is a heck of a ball player, and and his teammates rave about him. So I know he'll land on his feet. And Brennan Mary and the OC at UNLV is fantastic. So I'm sure I think everybody will end up all right. It's just a crappy situation to happen midseason.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that when the first news initially broke, everyone's like, "Oh, how dare this kid quit on his team?" And then the story developed a little more, and everyone went, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is not good."
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? It's like it's so hard, right? And it's so nuanced because at the end of the day, when you think about compensation, that's good for services rendered, right? So if I'm putting my body on the line and I'm giving you my service, and there's supposed to be compensation involved, but then like there's the locker room football side that's like, hey, like you have 100 guys in the locker room that are bought into you, and
Yeah.
we're winning and we're doing the right thing, and we grinded through summer workouts together, and we grinded through spring ball together, and we grinded through preseason camp together. And it's one of those things where like you almost think to yourself, I don't know. I'm never that high a level of an athlete. I've never had to make business decisions at that level. But the football guy in me wishes that he could have stayed in the locker room and figured it out. And I think I'm sure he did. I don't know the situation, but the football guy in me wishes that able to kind of find some resolution. Yeah. So I don't know what that looks like, but it's just tough because like I get the business decision because if there's an agreement there and it wasn't fulfilled, I understand that. But part of me is like, yeah, but there's a locker room of guys depending on you, man. So that's the tricky part.
I'm guessing that he probably explored every avenue to stay
Mhm.
on the team because no one wants to give up a year of their life like this anyway,
Right.
and if they could have come up with the money, then he would have stayed.
Yeah,
I don't think he thought of this today and went, I'm
no,
done.
right. Well, that's the right. No, I'm sure no decision was made, fickle or without thought. I think the tricky part to me is like there's somebody associated with that program that can figure this out. You know what I mean? That's
Mhm.
that's where my brain goes. Again, like I said before, I'm the focus on how can we make this thing happen, right? What are all
Yeah.
the reasons it can go well? And I feel like there's some reasons where it could go well that I guess are just missing for whatever reason. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think that you know, Matt Luca, whoever he does end up playing for, is getting a ball player. Trust me, he is a dude.
Awesome. All right, so I have one more question for you. I also asked this question of everybody.
Yep.
Let's say they put you in charge of the MPA for one day.
Okay.
Okay, you have total dictator power of the MPA. What do you do?
Ooh, this is great. For schools, and this is utopia, right? This is like in a perfect
Yeah.
world. I would suggest that schools allow the PE credit to happen during the day for the sports practice. So what I'm saying is that instead of a
This is the new one.
a football player going to gym class and then going to practice after school, practice would take part during the school day during that 80-minute block, and that would be their PE credit, but also their football practice for the day. So the students
I
that
like
aren't
this.
varsity athletes go to PE. The ones that are go to practice for their sport that's in season. There's no after school practices, so transportation issues, things like that. They're able to stay after academically for school because there's no practice to rush to. And I think it allows to have every kid there in a controlled setting without having, supervision, locker room, back and forth, going home, being late, things like that. When I recruited Arizona and Phoenix at Saguaro High School, their first period every day was like phys ed. And if you're a varsity athlete, that was like your practice for the day. Now, the reason they do it is because it gets really, really hot in the afternoon. So they do it in the
Sure.
mornings. But I think that model makes a lot of sense. So I think if I was, if I had like ultimate control and there was a way to do it, and I know there's moving factors with co-ops and things like that, and coaches with day jobs, but in a perfect world for me would be like, if you're a basketball player, then period 4 is basketball practice, and that's your PE credit, instead of trying to sort through gym times and from 2:30 to 7 or whatever's available with however many different teams, boys and girls.
So I have a personal attachment to this idea. This is why I love it so much. Is
Okay.
100 years ago when I was a high school basketball player, we had a game and we had outside phys ed
Okay.
playing soccer on a frozen field.
Mm.
And I'm like, I'm going to play goalie or something or not do a lot because we got a game tonight.
Yep.
And the phys ed teacher like made us all run. And I'm like, I have a game tonight. I have a sore knee.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not happening. And then I
Yeah.
got sent to like the principal's office and it was a whole thing. And let me tell you who was the maddest of all was my coach.
Yeah. That's
Because it was a PE teacher on a power trip. And I'm like, you don't understand. We have a game tonight. This is not going to help my physical conditioning in any way, shape, or form.
right. And
This is a terrible idea.
right. And I think in my mind, it's like, I think PE, the goal is to be active and, health and wellness. Like
Get off the couch.
Clearly a varsity athletes, participating and being active in their health and wellness.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Like I'm the starting point guard. I'm fine.
that's the thing. And I think that's where it's like, I don't know if it's feasible in our state, but I will say that I feel like that is something that like people should explore. I mean, I don't know. If I was a gym teacher and I had my players in class, it's kind of tricky, right? Like, all right, what's the lesson plan for that day? Because in my mind, I'm like, hey, what if we like did the drills that are going to help us win the game Friday night? So yeah, but yeah, that would probably.
I mean, it could just be the phys ed period is just study hall if you're a varsity athlete in season because you're already gonna get that. You're gonna spend that time running anyway.
Right, I agree. Now
I like it. No one has brought that. No one has brought that up before.
Nice. Well, where did you play basketball, by the way? Where did you go to school?
I didn't play at an MPA school. I played at a Christian school in the Mid-Coast area.
Cool.
But in Waldoboro, but I grew up in the Madomic Valley program.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And my brother was the girls varsity coach at Madomic for a while.
Oh, nice. Good stuff. My brother won the Fitzpatrick Trophy in 07 and then played at Maine.
Oh.
And so it was
very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Good. I'm very passionate about Maine sports, high school and college. So I'm like,
awesome.
I'm always curious when I meet other people. Yeah.
So that's why you had to come back. You're like, I missed the tournament too much.
I maintain this. I think the Maine high school basketball tournament is like the best thing in the world.
It's so awesome.
What year was it that Caribou won the state championship?
Ooh, it was pre-COVID. Was that 18 or 19?
And it was 50 years to the day or something like that where they won it.
Yeah. I was at that game. That was amazing.
I wasn't in the building, but I saw my every little alma mater, Adam Robinson, posted a video of like that side. And it took me back to when I was in Maine, right? And I was in college. And when you're a junior and senior in college, you're of age. So we'd go down to like Hollywood slots and hang out, right? When the tournament was at the Cross Insurance Center, the amount of people in that hotel that were from the county that came down, it was like something out of a movie. It's a long drive, but like I love the idea. Like I just imagine myself as a parent, right? Let's say your son's playing. Reese is playing in the regional quarterfinal on a Tuesday during February break. If they win, they play Thursday. If they win, they play Saturday. And
you're not going back to Caribou.
You're renting hotel rooms one night at a time, just dying for that extra night to try to win a gold ball. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. So I remember that from college, and then I remember just like the idea that like it felt like half the town of Caribou was in Portland, and like a mob of people wants to win a state championship. That's just stuff
they were.
It's just cool to me. So I think the basketball tournament's awesome. My last basketball game I ever played, we lost the state championship to Chevrolet, so I'm still a little salty.
I was for that Caribou game. I was in the hockey press box on that side, and they were in that press box the entire game. They were not sober. They had been pre-gaming all day. Did not care. They were having a great time.
And again, I just love when a community I'm living it right now. When a community comes together to support a program, it's special, and it's really, really special. So I just love that, and I just love that the Maine tournament, man. It's just electric, man. This is just really, really cool. And I will say I think it's well run. You know what I mean? I have friends that coach different programs, and this past winter I was watching a bunch of games, and it's just it's fun, something to do. You know what I mean? Super entertaining, and it's just it's cool. So.
Yeah, it's you love those games when it's like last person to leave town. Would you please shut off the lights?
I love it
because everyone's going to the game.
Oh my god, it's funny too because I feel like that's Maine's version of like Texas high school football. You know what I mean? We're like I've been you go down south and I've recruited down in like Georgia and stuff like that. And it truly is, the town shuts down. Like the gas station's not open because there's a football game. And like obviously Maine, it's not that, but it is cool when a town makes a decision to kind of go support and carpool and head down 95 and go watch a high school basketball game. It's awesome.
It's very cool. All right. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. Best of luck this week against Freiburg. That's going to be a big game.
Yeah. Sure.
And best of luck the rest of the season.
Sounds good. Appreciate you.
And thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah. Your shirt's in the mail. We'll be there a couple days. We'll get you nice and current. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, that's the show. Thanks to Spencer Emerson for joining me. That was just so fantastic. We'll do a quick little outro here. This has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for the most comprehensive coverage of Maine high school basketball from Ashland to York and everywhere in between. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts and a bunch of places you don't. If you enjoy this, please leave a nice review because it helps so much with algorithms and helping other people find the show. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, subscribe everywhere you subscribe to things. Thanks for listening.